The first thing I remember is not a mother's warmth. It is the floor. It was not cold, like the metal decks of the ships I would see later in nightmares, nor was it rough, like the earth of a dying world. It was smooth. It was alive. The material hummed against my cheek, a low vibration that felt like a second heartbeat, slower and far more patient than my own. This was the Wraithbone. It sang to them, to the tall, slender figures that glided through the arched hallways. The walls whispered secrets and comfort. But to me, it was just a surface. I pressed my ear against it, desperate to hear the song they all seemed to move to, but I heard nothing. Just the thudding of my own pulse. That was the first lesson I learned. The world was alive, but it was not alive for me. I was loud. That is the truest memory of my childhood. In a place of absolute crystalline perfection, I was a riot of noise. They moved like smoke, their feet making no sound on the living floor, their armor chiming softly only when they wished it to. They communicated in glances and subtle shifts of posture and psychic projections that I could not feel. I had to speak. I had to open my mouth and force air through wet, meat-slapping vocal cords. Every time I cried, it sounded like a bomb going off in a library. Every time I laughed, it was a bark. I remember the warlock who oversaw the nursery. He did not look at me with hate. He looked at me with the mild confusion one might have for a leaking pipe. He would stand over my crib, his face hidden behind a mask of smooth, ghost-white curves, and I would stop breathing, trying to be as still as he was. I always failed. My lungs demanded air. My stomach gurgled. My joints clicked. They named me Ilaris. Later, I learned the nuances of their language, the musical syntax that twists meaning depending on the pitch. They told me it meant something poetic. But I learned the truth when I heard a guardian use the word for a decorative plant that blooms for a day and then rots. Ilaris, the fleeting amusement, the disposable thing. I wore the name like a collar. I wanted to be like them. God, Emperor, help me. I wanted it more than I wanted to breathe. I would watch them walk the way their limbs flowed like water, and I would try to mimic it. I would tiptoe through the great domes of the craft world, holding my breath until my vision blurred. But I was heavy. Gravity seemed to pull harder on my bones than theirs. I was a sack of wet clay trying to emulate a beam of light. There was a day that defined the rest of my life. I was perhaps 6 cycles old by human reckoning. I had been allowed into the Hall of Reflections, a place of dizzying vertigo, where the ceiling mirrored the floor and the stars of the void seemed to be trapped in the glass. The air smelled of ozone and ancient dried flowers. I was carrying a tray. It was a simple task, a test of utility. On the tray sat a single goblet carved from a crystal that grew naturally in the psychoplastic gardens. It was beautiful. It caught the light of the nebula outside and fractured it into a million colors. I remember thinking that if I could just carry this cup to the pedestal without making a sound, they would finally see me. They would see that I was not just a Monkey beast. I was one of them. I concentrated. I focused every ounce of my will on my footsteps. Heel toe, heel toe. Silence. The warlock was watching. His helmet was off. His face was long, angular, terrifyingly perfect. His eyes were like voids lacking the whites that human eyes have, just pools of liquid depth. He watched me with that same unbearable neutrality. I was doing it. I was halfway across the hall. The silence was heavy, a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. And then my body betrayed me. It was a small thing, a twitch in my forearm, a spasm of a muscle that wasn't built for this degree of tension. The tray tipped. The sound was not just a noise, it was a violence. The goblet hit the wraithbone floor and shattered. The crash echoed through the hall, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings, amplifying until it sounded like a scream. Shards of crystal skittered across the smooth surface, spinning and ringing. I froze. The noise of the impact died away, but the echo remained in my mind. I waited for the anger. I waited for the warlock to shout, to strike me, to show some flash of the fury that I knew humans possessed. I wanted him to yell. Screaming would have been a connection. It would have meant I mattered enough to upset him. He did not move. He did not blink. He simply looked at the shards, then at me. There was no rage in his face. There was only a profound, crushing disappointment. It was the look a master artisan gives to a tool that has snapped in his hand, not angry at the metal, but weary that he must now find a replacement. "You are loud, Aelaris," he said. His voice was melodic, beautiful and cold as the void. "Your thoughts thunder like a rock slide. And your hands," he gestured gracefully to the mess. "You are clumsy. It is in your blood. You cannot help it." He turned and walked away. He left me there with the broken crystal. That was the punishment. Not a beating. Not a cage. Just the undeniable truth delivered without malice. I fell to my knees to pick up the pieces. I cut my finger on a sharp edge. The blood welled up bright red, stark and ugly against the pale, singing floor. I stared at the red drop. It looked toxic. It looked dirty. I frantically wiped it away with my sleeve, terrified that my blood would stain their perfect world. The floor seemed to recoil from the touch of it, the hum dampening where the blood had smeared. I scrubbed until the skin was raw, crying silently, my snot and tears dripping down, adding more fluids to the mess. I was a leaking vessel of biology in a world of spirit. That night, I found a mirror. It was not a glass mirror like we have in the Imperium, but a polished section of the wall that showed a reflection truer than reality. I looked at myself. I looked for the Aeldari I tried so hard to be. I saw a monster. My face was flat and smashed compared to theirs. My jaw was square and brutish. My skin was thick, filled with pores, and hair that caught the light. But it was the ears that broke me. They were round, useless, fleshy semicircles stuck to the side of my head. They looked like tumors. I pulled at the tops of them, pinching the cartilage, trying to force them into points, trying to mold the flesh into something elegant. I pulled until they bruised. I pulled until I was sobbing, staring into the eyes of the creature in the mirror. I realized then that no matter how much I practiced silence, no matter how perfectly I learned their tongue, I would always be this. I was meat. They were art. I sat in the dark of the nursery listening to the ship sing to everyone but me, and for the first time, I hated my own heart for beating. It was a drum of war in a temple of peace. And I knew with the clarity of a child who has seen too much that I would never be forgiven for being human. I began to hate my own scent. That is a strange thing to say, perhaps, but you don't know what it is like to live among creatures who do not sweat. The Aeldari do not perspire as we do. When they exert themselves, they simply glow with a faint inner heat, and the air around them smells of ozone and petrichor like a garden after a lightning storm. I, however, was a biological furnace. I ran through the corridors trying to keep pace with their gliding strides, and I would become damp. My skin slicked with oil and salt. The smell of it, the sour bacterial tang of humanity filled the pristine hallways. I scrubbed myself until my skin was red and peeling. I stole their scented oils, rubbing them into my pores until I smelled like a perfumed corpse. But the underlying stench of being human always returned. I was a stain on a white silk sheet. I decided that if I could not be them in spirit, I would force my body to mimic their shape. I became a voyeur of violence. I would hide in the ventilation shafts above the aspect shrines, peering through the grates to watch the howling banshees train. Down below, they were a blur of bone-colored armor and crimson hair. They did not fight like soldiers of the Imperium. I have seen Imperial Guard drills since then. Men shouting, hacking, bludgeoning with the grace of butchers. The banshees were different. They were mathematics made flesh, geometry in motion. A kick was not just a strike, it was the completion of a circle. A sword stroke was a line of poetry. They moved so fast that my clumsy human eyes could barely track them, leaving afterimages burned into my retinas. One cycle the shrine was empty. The floor was polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the vaulted ceiling of the dome. I lowered myself down from the vent. My boots hit the floor with a heavy rubbery squeak that made me wince. I stood in the center of the arena. I closed my eyes. I pictured the exarch I had watched earlier, the way she had pivoted on a single toe, her body twisting like a ribbon in the wind to deliver a killing blow. I could see it perfectly in my mind. I wanted to be that beautiful. I wanted to be that deadly. I began to move. I tried to replicate the kata. I threw my weight forward, attempting to spin on the ball of my foot. But my center of gravity was wrong. My bones were too heavy, my hips too wide, my spine too stiff. I forced the turn anyway. I threw myself into the spin with all the desperate strength of a child, praying for a miracle. I felt the snap before I felt the pain. It was a wet, sickening pop deep in my knee. My leg gave way. I did not land like a cat. I landed like a side of beef dropped from a hook. I slammed into the wraithbone floor, my shoulder taking the impact, my breath leaving me in a pathetic wheeze. I lay there clutching my twisted knee, biting my lip to keep from screaming. Screaming was forbidden. Screaming was loud. I dragged myself into a sitting position, sweat stinging my eyes. That was when I saw him. A dire avenger stood in the archway. He was wearing his helmet, the high crest looming over me. I did not know how long he had been watching. That was the horror of them. They were always there, silent as judgment. I waited for him to help me. I waited for him to ask if I was injured. He walked forward, his movements fluid, mocking my broken sprawl. He stopped a few feet away. He did not look at my swollen knee. He looked at my face, flushed with exertion and shame. "Do not try to dance, Aeldari," he said. His voice was modulated by his helm, stripping it of emotion, leaving only cold fact. Stones cannot fly. When they try, they only crack the pavement. He wasn't mocking me. That would have implied I was worth the effort of ridicule. He was simply stating a law of physics. I was a stone. I belonged in the dirt. I am sorry, Master. I gasped, the pain in my leg making my voice tremble. I just wanted to be like you. He tilted his head, a bird-like movement of curiosity. Why, he asked. Why would a grox wish to be an eagle? It serves its purpose in the mud. He reached into a storage alcove near the wall. I thought he was getting a medical device. Instead, he pulled out a bundle of fabric and mesh. He tossed it at me. It hit my chest with a dull thud. It was armor. But it was not the sleek psychoplastic plates they wore. It was guardian mesh, old pitted scavenged, perhaps from a corpse they hadn't bothered to reclaim fully. It was too big for me. "Cover yourself," he said, turning his back. "Your skin. It distracts the initiates. It is raw. It looks unfinished." He walked away, leaving me alone in the shrine. I pulled the mesh over my head. It smelled of old blood and alien musk. It chafed my skin. It didn't fit. But I cinched the straps tight, ignoring the pain in my knee. I covered my arms. I covered my neck. I hid as much of my human meat as I could. I would wear their cast-offs. I would hide my shame. If I could not be beautiful, I would at least be invisible. The air in the Chamber of Ascendance did not feel like air. It felt like water, thick and pressurized at the bottom of a deep ocean. The Seer Council had gathered. To my eyes, they were simply standing in a circle, their robes motionless, their runes glowing with a soft, pulsing light. But I knew that was a lie. My eyes were primitive apertures, capable only of seeing the surface of reality. To them, the room was a storm. They were singing a song that could burn worlds, weaving the threads of fate itself. I stood in the corner, holding a staff of office that was too heavy for me, trying to remain upright. I was the furniture. I was the pet allowed to witness the masters at work. It started as a dull ache behind my eyes. Then it became a drill. The psychic resonance of the craft world rose to a crescendo. I could feel the wraithbone vibrating under my boots, not mechanically, but sympathetically, shivering with the sheer power being channeled through the dome. For the Aeldari, this was ecstasy. I saw the Farseer's head tilt back, her expression, one of sublime focus, drinking in the warp energy like fine wine. For me, it was torture. My human brain was a receiver, tuned to the wrong frequency. The static built up inside my skull. A high-pitched whine like a mosquito trapped in my ear canal grew louder and louder until it drowned out the beating of my heart. I tried to swallow the bile rising in my throat. I knew the rules. Do not disrupt the circle. Do not make a sound. But the pressure was immense. It felt as if invisible hands were squeezing my temples, trying to crush the bone to get at the soft meat inside. My vision began to swim. The perfect geometric lines of the chamber bent and warped. The seers stretched into elongated shapes of light and shadow. I fell to one knee. The impact of my knee pad against the floor was a thunderclap to my own ears, but they didn't flinch. They were too deep in the Imperium. Then came the warmth. It started at my upper lip, wet and metallic. I reached up my hand, trembling, and touched my face. My fingers came away red. Dark, thick, crimson blood. It dripped onto the pristine white floor. Drip. Drip. The sound was microscopic, but in the psychic vacuum of the room, it felt obscene. I looked at the blood. It tasted of iron and rust. It was the taste of a dying machine. I tried to wipe it away to catch the flow in my cupped hands, but it kept coming, a rejection of my biology against the psychic pressure. I was bleeding because I was too weak to exist in their presence. The chanting stopped. The light in the runes died down. The pressure lifted instantly, leaving me gasping for air on the floor, a pool of red beneath my face. The silence returned, but this time it was sharp. I looked up. The Farseer was looking down at me. Her face was unreadable, a mask of porcelain perfection. She did not look concerned. She looked at the blood on the floor with the same expression one might have for a dog that has soiled the carpet. "The Mon Key is leaking," a warlock said. His voice was not cruel, merely observational. "Its vessel is too small. It cannot hold the resonance." "It has no resonance," the Farseer corrected softly. She stepped closer, her robes, floating inches above my blood, repelled by an invisible force field of disgust. She looked into my eyes. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see my devotion, my endurance. But she looked through me. Its soul is dim, like a candle guttering in a hurricane. It feels nothing of the path. It is blind in a world of light. "Is it useful?" the warlock asked. He was adjusting his gloves, seemingly bored. "Or should we consign it to the biofurnace? The organic matter could be reclaimed." I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. The biofurnace. I knew what that was. I had seen the dead gardens where they mulched the waste. "Keep it," the Farseer said, turning away. Her voice drifted back to me, casual and devastating. "We need a carrier for the expedition to the Exodite world. someone to haul the supplies that are too heavy for the grav sleds. And if the enemy fires, it is better they hit the meat than the spirit. She walked out. The warlock followed. I was left alone in the dark, clutching my bleeding nose, the taste of rust filling my mouth. I wasn't an apprentice. I wasn't a student. I was a mule. I was a meat shield. I sat there as the lights dimmed, and for the first time, I understood the terrifying utility of my existence. I was kept alive, not because I was loved, but because I was cheaper to replace than a drone. They gave me a weapon. It was a shuriken pistol, an elegant curve of psychoplastic that felt less like a tool of war and more like a sculpture carved from the bone of a god. To an Aeldari, this weapon is an extension of the self. It has no mechanical trigger in the way a human weapon does. It fires when the wielder's mind connects with the spirit of the gun, a seamless impulse of intent. I held it in my hands. My palms were sweating. The wraithbone felt slick, almost oily, as if it were trying to slide out of my grip. It felt alive. I could feel a faint rhythmic pulsing deep within the casing, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I pointed it at the target range wall. I focused. I squeezed my eyes shut and thought the word, fire. I screamed it inside my head. Nothing happened. The gun remained dormant. It was dead weight in my hand. It could sense me. It could taste the void where my psychic potential should have been. It knew I was a Monkey, a creature of mud and blunt trauma, and it refused to sing for me. I stood there shaking my face, burning with humiliation. A guardian stood behind me. He did not help. He watched with that insufferable statuesque patience. "It is disgusted by you," he said. His voice was light conversational. "It does not wish to obey a mind that screams. You are trying to command the wind with a shovel?" I had to break it to make it work. I couldn't use the psychosensitive link, so I found the manual override, a small, stiff stud near the grip intended for maintenance protocols. It wasn't meant to be used for firing. It required 4 pounds of pressure. I had to curl my index finger around it and squeeze until my knuckle turned white and my tendon popped. Click. A harsh mechanical snap that echoed in the silent armory. The weapon hummed to life, reluctant and angry. I fired. A disc of monofilament shaved the edge off the target. Click. Another shot. Click. The sound was rhythmic and ugly. It wasn't the flowing stream of death the Aeldari produced. It was a stutter. "You hold it like a club," the guardian sneered, finally stepping forward to correct my stance. He didn't touch me. He used the tip of his spear to nudge my elbow, avoiding skin contact. "You rely on the mechanism. You ignore the spirit. It will jam, you know. It will fail you because you do not respect it." "It will fire," I said, my voice hoarse. "That is all I need." "It will fire," he agreed, "but it will not strike true. A weapon without a soul is just a rock." The transport ship, the Wave Serpent, was a claustrophobic nightmare of silence. We sat in the troop compartment, the warriors around me slipping into their war masks, a meditative trance where they shed their emotions to become pure avatars of Cain. They sat perfectly still. I sat in the corner, the harness digging into my shoulders too tight across my broad chest and too loose around my waist. I kept clicking the safety of the pistol. Click. Click. It was the only sound I could make to remind myself I existed. Then the ramp hissed open. The air that rushed in hit me like a physical blow. It didn't smell like the sterile, perfumed loops of the craft world. It didn't smell of incense or ozone. It smelled of sulfur, of burning promethium, of wet, rotting vegetation and churned earth. The Aeldari recoiled, their helmets sealing tighter against the filth of the lower world. They hesitated, disgusted by the sheer sensory assault of a planet at war. But I took a deep breath. The toxins burned my lungs. The grit coated my tongue. It was foul. It was poisonous. It was the first thing in 20 years that felt real. The battle was not a fight. It was a performance. I watched from the mud as the striking scorpions materialized from the shadows, their chainswords singing a high harmonic trill that sounded nothing like the roar of Imperial weapons. They did not hack. They dissected. They moved through the mob of orcs, like water flowing around rocks, severing tendons and throats with surgical precision. There was no wasted movement, no screaming, just the wet hiss of monofilament and the thud of green bodies hitting the earth. It was beautiful. It was sterile. And then, one of the beasts broke through the line. It was a massive slab of muscle and bad temper, swinging a rusted cleaver the size of my torso. It bypassed the elegant dancers and charged straight for me. The Aeldari did not intervene. Perhaps they didn't see it. Perhaps they wanted to see if the pet could bite. The creature slammed into me, and the air left my lungs in a burst of agony. We went down into the sludge. The smell hit me instantly, rancid sweat fungus and dry blood. It was the smell of life in its most aggressive, cancerous form. My beautiful, soulful pistol was useless pinned between our chests. I couldn't reach the trigger. I couldn't find the manual override. I reverted. The mask of civilization I had worn for 20 years shattered. I didn't think in Aeldari musical syntax. I didn't worry about grace. I headbutted the creature. I felt my own nose crunch a bright flare of pain that blinded me. I jammed my thumbs into its eyes. It roared a sound that vibrated in my teeth, and I screamed back a raw, wordless animal noise. I found a rock in the mud, a jagged, dirty piece of granite. I brought it down. Again. Again. There was a sickening, wet, crunching sound. The hot spray of alien blood coated my face, thick and viscous. I kept hitting it long after it stopped moving. I was panting, sobbing, covered in muck and gore, my heart hammering like a piston engine. I stood up. I was trembling. I looked around, waiting for praise. I had survived. I had killed the enemy. I turned to the Exarch leading the squad. He was standing 10 paces away, his green armor pristine, not a speck of dirt on him. He was looking at me. He took a step back. It was a small movement, but it cut deeper than the orc's cleaver. He wasn't wary of a threat. He was avoiding a stain. "You are covered in filth," he said. The translation doesn't capture the nuance. The word he used meant spiritual pollution as much as physical dirt. "You smell of the grave." I defended the position, I stammered, wiping the blood from my eyes, only to smear more dirt across my skin. "You made a mess," he replied, turning his back. "Walk behind us, Monkey. Downwind. Do not let that stench distract the warriors." We moved deeper into the ruins, into the sector held by the humans. I had never seen the soldiers of the Imperium up close. I had only heard stories of the great enemy from my masters. Tales of a species so blindly xenophobic they would burn their own worlds to kill a single stranger. Then I saw them, a patrol of guardsmen clad in flak armor clutching laser guns that looked like toys compared to the sleek weaponry of the craft world. But there was something terrifying in their eyes, a dull, heavy hatred, a certainty. They saw the Aeldari and raised their weapons, shouting orders in low Gothic. It was a guttural barking language, clumsy, hard syllables crashing into each other. It hurt my ears. And then one of them saw me. He paused. He lowered his rifle, slightly squinting through the smoke. He saw a human face. He saw the round ears. He saw the mismatched, scavenged armor. "Traitor," he screamed. The word hung in the air. Heretic, xeno-lover. The accusation hit me harder than a bullet. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him I was not like him. I was chosen. I was raised in the light of the stars. But when I opened my mouth, I didn't speak Gothic. I panicked. I shouted back in Aeldari. I am Alaris. I am of the path. But my human throat could not shape the sounds. I couldn't hit the pitch. It came out as a garbled, shrieking mockery of their language. I sounded like a beast trying to sing opera. The guardsman's face twisted from confusion to pure loathing. Die, freak, he spat. The bolter fire started. It was deafening. Boom, boom, boom. The heavy rounds tore up the earth around me. I scrambled for cover, terrified, not just of death, but of the realization that I had no people. To the Aeldari, I was a pet. To the humans, I was a monster. I was alone in the universe. A stray round caught me in the shoulder. It didn't punch through cleanly like a shuriken. It exploded. The impact spun me around, throwing me against a crumbling wall. The Aeldari returned fire. It was over in seconds. The guardsmen fell, their throats slit by invisible blades. The warlock walked over to where I lay bleeding. He looked at the wound. My shoulder was a ruin of meat and bone. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't offer a word of comfort. He looked at the pack I was carrying, the satchel containing the soul stones we had come to retrieve. The cargo is intact, he announced to the squad. Then he looked at me. Can you walk? It hurts, I whispered. Pain is a signal, he said dismissively. Ignore it. If you stay here, the Mon Key will find you, and they will not be as quick as we are. He turned and began to walk away. Pick him up, he ordered a guardian as one might order a servant to pick up a dropped bag. We need him to carry the stones back to the ship. The healing trance was not sleep. Sleep is a mercy. It is a void where the mind rests. The healing of the Aeldari is a lucid nightmare of sensation. I lay on a slab of cold white wraithbone in the halls of mending. A bone singer stood over me. He did not touch me with his hands. He played an instrument that looked like a flute made of glass, weaving a song that manipulated organic matter. For an Aeldari, this song encourages the cells to knit together in perfect harmony, a painless restoration of their flawless form. For me, it felt like millions of microscopic ants were eating my shoulder from the inside out. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed off the high, sterile walls. The bone singer stopped playing. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. He looked down at me, his face a mask of mild irritation, like a musician interrupted by a coughing audience member. Your nervous system is crude, he observed, his voice devoid of sympathy. It interprets the restructuring frequencies as pain. It is a flaw in your design. Please, I gasped, sweat pooling in the hollow of my throat. Give me something. To numb it. To dull the senses is to deny the reality of the flesh, he replied, raising the instrument again. Besides, our analgesics would stop your primitive heart. Bear it, or do not. The tissue must be sealed. He began to play again. The ants returned, chewing, stitching, burning. I bit through my lip to stop the screaming, adding the taste of fresh blood to the ordeal. I stared at the ceiling, counting the glowing runes, praying to a god emperor I wasn't allowed to worship, just to make the time pass. When it was over, I looked at my shoulder. The wound was closed, but it was not right. On an Aeldari, a healed wound leaves no mark. The skin returns to its virgin state. On me, the flesh had rebelled. It had knotted into a thick, pink raised scar. A keloid, a jagged ridge of ugly, stubborn biology. The bone singer inspected it, running a long, slender finger over the bump. He pulled his hand back quickly, as if he had touched slime. Ugly, he murmured. It heals, but it remembers the injury. It creates a monument to its own damage. How typical of your species. He turned away to clean his instrument. You are functional, Alaris. Go. The sight of it disrupts the harmony of this room. Time in the webway is a liar. We stepped into the labyrinthine dimension to travel to a distant maiden world a journey that felt like days to my masters. We walked the shimmering paths between stars, shielded from the warp by the ancient tunnels of the old ones. To them, it was a commute. To me, it was a thief. The physics of the webway interact strangely with human physiology. Without the psychic anchors the Aeldari possess, my body drifted in the temporal current. When we stepped out onto the destination world, the Far Sire looked exactly as she had when we left. Her skin was smooth, her eyes bright, her movements ageless. I fell to my knees coughing. It was a wet, rattling cough that shook my ribcage. I looked at my hands. The skin was thinner. Veins were blue and prominent, winding like rivers across the back of my knuckles. My joints popped and groaned as I tried to stand. I had aged. 10 years, 15. It was impossible to tell, but the youth I had clung to was gone. The strength I had used to carry their burdens was evaporating. I was becoming an old man in a world of immortals. I walked through the Garden of Silence, later that cycle, my breath wheezing. I saw them, the Aeldari children I had watched play when I was first brought to the craft world. They were still children. They were playing the same game, tossing a sphere of light back and forth, their laughter like silver bells. I stopped. One of them, a girl with eyes the color of amethysts, stopped and looked at me. She tilted her head. She didn't recognize me. To her, the time that had ravaged my body was nothing more than a lazy afternoon. "Who is the old Monkey?" she asked her companion. "It is Alaris," the boy replied, squinting at me. "The pet. He is spoiled. Look at his hair. It turns the color of ash." They didn't invite me to play. They didn't mock me. They simply lost interest, turning back to their sphere of light. I stood there, a ghost in my own life, realizing that I was not just a different species. I was a different scale of time. I was a mayfly falling in love with a mountain. I leaned against a tree, the bark warm and living against my back. And for the first time, I felt the terrifying weight of my own mortality crushing me. I was dying minute by minute, and they would watch me rot with the same detached curiosity they had for a wilting flower. The inevitable happened 3 cycles later. I was polishing the armor of the autarch, my hands trembling slightly with the arthritis that the webway had gifted me. The door opened. The autarch walked in, and behind him trailed a small, shivering figure. It was a boy, a human boy. He could not have been more than 5 years old. He was dirty, skinny, his eyes wide with the same terror and awe I remembered feeling so long ago. He looked at the towering Aeldari, at the singing architecture, at the light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He was enchanted. He was doomed. Alaris the autarch said, not looking up from his data slate. "This is... I have not named it yet. You will show it the routines. You will teach it to be quiet. You will teach it not to smell." I looked at the boy. He looked at me. He saw a human face and smiled a desperate, hopeful expression. He thought he had found a friend. He thought I was his savior. I felt a surge of jealousy so potent it tasted like bile. He was young. His skin was tight and fresh. He had a lifetime of utility ahead of him. I was the broken tool. I was the old model. "Come here," I said to the boy. My voice was rough gravel rubbing against gravel. "Don't touch the walls. Don't look them in the eyes." Are you like me?" the boy whispered, reaching out a small, grimy hand. I slapped his hand away. It was a cruel instinct born of bitterness. "No," I hissed. "I am Alaris. I serve the craft world. You are nothing." I saw the hurt in his eyes, the confusion, and I hated myself. But I hated him more, because he was the mirror of my beginning, and I was the mirror of his end. The autarch noticed my slowness the next day. I dropped a canister of nutrient paste. My grip had failed. He didn't scold me. He simply gestured to the door. "You are struggling, Aelaris. The lower decks require maintenance. The atmospheric scrubbers are clogged with dust. It is simple work, heavy work. Go there." "Master," I pleaded, "I can still serve the shrine. I can still—" "You are shedding," he said, pointing to a few gray hairs on the floor. "You contaminate the sacred spaces. Go to the dark, where the dirt belongs." So I went down. I descended into the bowels of the craft world, away from the light, away from the gardens, away from the music. The lower deck smelled of stale air and machine oil. It smelled like the Imperium. I sat in the gloom, surrounded by the hum of the waste recyclers, and listened to the silence above me. I had been replaced. The cage was no longer gilded. It was just a cage, and I was finally exactly where they had always believed I belonged. The end did not come with a bang. It came with a shiver. The air pressure in the lower decks dropped, and the taste of ozone turned sharp, sour like milk left in the sun. The psychic scream of the craft world changed from a hum to a shriek of warning. We were boarded. I didn't know if it was the great enemy or the devourers of biomass. It didn't matter. I was old. My joints burned with every movement. But I remembered the nursery. I remembered the amethyst eyes of the children who didn't know my name. I found the pistol. It was covered in dust, hidden under a pile of rags in my maintenance cell. I picked it up. It felt heavy. It felt cold. I ran, or rather, I shambled. My lungs wheezed, pumping air that felt too thin. I climbed the ramps back to the light, back to the upper decks. I found chaos. Not the disorderly panic of humans, but a swirling dance of violence. The Guardians were holding the line, their shuriken catapults, singing a song of death. But something had slipped through. A shape of shadow and claws, a creature of the warp scuttling across the ceiling towards the inner sanctum, towards the children. I stepped into the corridor. I was not a warrior. I was a janitor with a stolen gun. I raised the pistol. I didn't try to link with it. I didn't try to be elegant. I slammed my finger against the manual override. Click. Snap. The shot went wide, hitting the wall, but it drew the creature's eye. It dropped from the ceiling, hissing a nightmare of teeth and shifting flesh. It looked at me. It saw prey. It leaped. I didn't shoot again. I didn't have time. I threw myself in front of the door to the nursery. I used the only thing I had of value, my mass, my heavy, dense human meat. The creature hit me. It felt like being struck by a train. Claws tore through the mesh armor, through skin, through muscle. I felt my ribs snap inwards. I felt the creature on top of me, its jaws snapping inches from my face. I smelled its breath-ridden souls and warp dust. Then a flash of green. A singing blade severed the beast's head. The weight of the carcass went limp on top of me. I lay there, gasping, blood bubbling in my throat. I looked up. A striking scorpion stood over me. He kicked the beast's body aside. He looked at the door I had blocked. Then he looked at me. I waited for a nod. A well done. Acknowledgement that the pet had bitten back. "Move," he said. He nudged my shattered leg with his boot. "You are blocking the tactical withdrawal route. The children must be evacuated." "I saved them," I gurgled, blood spilling over my lips. "You are an obstruction," he replied, stepping over my broken body as if I were a fallen branch. "Clear the hallway. You clutter the path." The pain faded quickly. That was the only mercy. The cold took over. I lay on the white floor, the red pool spreading around me. It was so quiet. The battle had moved on. The lights in the corridor were dimming, conserving power for the shields. I stared up at the ceiling. The wraithbone seemed to be pulsing slower, matching my fading heart. I started to dream. I saw a stone, a spirit stone glowing with a warm golden light. It was descending towards me. I reached up with a trembling hand. They are coming for me, I thought. They have accepted me. I will not go to the warp. I will join the infinity circuit. I will be an ancestor. I could hear the song of the dead, 1,000 voices welcoming me home. Aeldari, they whispered. Brother. Guardian. Son. Vital signs critical of voice cut through the dream. It was not a spirit. It was a warlock. He was kneeling beside me. Reality crashed back in. There was no golden light, just the harsh glare of his helmet optics. He was scanning me, not with compassion, but with a diagnostic tool. Is it time? I whispered. Is the stone ready? The warlock lowered the scanner. He looked at my hand, reaching for empty air. There is no stone for you, Mon-Ki. You have no soul that can be caught. You will simply cease. He stood up. He adjusted his robes. He looked at the pistol still clutched in my other hand. He bent down and pried it from my stiffening fingers. This is property of the shrine, he said, holstering it. A waste to leave it here. Help me, I breathed. The darkness was closing in. I was scared. I was a child again, in the nursery, terrified of the silence. It is inefficient to expend psychic energy on a terminal biological unit, he said. He turned to leave. Close your eyes. It will be over soon. You served adequately. He walked away. The footsteps faded. I was alone. The darkness didn't sing. It just ate the light. I tried to hum. I tried to make a sound, any sound, to fill the void, but my lungs were full of fluid. I died in silence, the absolute crushing silence I had spent my life trying to fill. I did not go to the stars. I went to the grinder. My body was collected by the servitors of the gardens. There was no funeral, no pyre. Organic matter on a craft world is precious. Nothing is wasted. I was stripped of my mesh, my clothes, my name. I was placed into the biorecycler. I became a slurry of nutrients. I became nitrogen. I became calcium. I was pumped into the irrigation systems of the Maiden World Dome. I became the roots of a wraithbone tree. I fed the white bark. I fed the silver leaves. I finally became part of their world, not as a citizen, but as fertilizer. A cycle later, the autarch walked through the garden. He was leading a new creature, a human boy perhaps 6 years old wearing my old tunic. It was too big for him. The boy looked around with wide, terrified eyes. He saw the tree I had become part of. He reached out to touch the bark. Don't touch that, the autarch commanded gently. It is delicate. The boy pulled his hand back. Who lived here before? The boy asked, his voice cracking. The autarch paused. He looked at the tree. He looked at the empty space where I used to stand. He frowned, trying to recall a detail that had already slipped from his mind, like water through fingers. A pet, the autarch said finally. I do not remember its name. It was loud. It is quiet now. He nudged the boy forward. Come, you have much to learn. Try not to be so clumsy. The boy walked on. The garden was silent. The tree stood still, and I was free.